To start off, for the home team, we have Green Bay, who has an absolutely elite offensive line with, in my opinion, no weaknesses. They well, I guess they have a weakness. They're not great in run blocking, but I meant in pass protection, they have no weaknesses. They also have a superstar that you may not hear much about in Zach Tom, who is one of the absolute best tackles in football. He's super smooth as a mover. He's very light on his feet. He's technically sound. He's added some strength. I would still say that it's not great for him in that regard, but overall, he's one of the best players at the tackle position and can absolutely shut down just about any edge rusher. And that's kind of where we pick off for the next advantage as well, as runs at Chop Robinson will be more than available. Robinson is a very, very good player, and he is super smooth. There I go saying smooth again, but he is smooth as an edge rusher for passing situations. He is not particularly good as a run defender, though. In fact, I would say that's a pretty big weakness of his. So there will be runs available to them. I'm not sure how much Miami rotates their edge rushers on different sides. So there might be times where they run to the left to attack Robinson, or there might be times where they run to the right to attack him. But he has such a glaring weakness that it would make sense to switch sides of runs, even if it gives a little bit of a tell, to be able to attack Robinson. The third thing I like for Green Bay is much more Miami centric, but is still an advantage nonetheless, with Tua struggling to throw in the cold. This is generally not something I believe in, as I think that most quarterbacks have enough arm talent to pierce through the cold air. Tua is a bit of an exception, though. He is just on the cusp of not having an NFL caliber arm, and that prevents him from being able to make throws at as consistent of a rate as other professional quarterbacks. There have definitely been times where I've seen him underthrow balls by a fair amount in the cold, and you just generally wouldn't see that from him. But there are also times where he's inaccurate in cold situations where I feel like he generally wouldn't be because he's a very accurate thrower in most cases. But I feel like he's going to be a little bit more inaccurate because he's trying to put more power on the ball. Another advantage the Packers have going to their offense, these are in order, by the way, of my idea for the importance of them, more so than they are in order of offense, defense, etc. So for the Packers, Jaden Reed is superior to Kader Kohu, the nickel correspondent for the Dolphins. Reed is obviously the slot for the Packers. He spends the vast majority of his time in the slot, and he's very effective there. Kohu, not so much. He is in the nickel quite often, but he's really struggling this year in coverage. So he can be attacked, and I think Reed will be able to do the job. Next, for the defense again, Jair Alexander can, and I want to stress can, neutralize Tyreek Hill. That isn't to say that he will, but he has the capacity to do so. And that's more than you can say for a lot of defensive backs. Yes, I know Hill is not having his typical great year, but one, Tua has missed a ton of the season. And two, Hill is still playing at a decent level. I'm not going to say much more than decent, but he's still playing at a decent level. So he's definitely still going to be a challenge. But another thing the Packers have going for them in their pursuit of slowing down Hill is that they have great, and I mean great, I think it's the second best pairing, only behind Detroit, in safeties. They will thereby prevent big plays from happening, and that's massive against the Dolphins. With Hill and Waddle and Achan, they live off of big plays in every form. So if you can slow down the big play, that's really big in making them go the full length of the field and play in a way that they don't want to naturally play in. The last thing Green Bay has going for them is an automatic one for me, because it does still matter, is the fact that they're the home field advantage. That matters a bit more, again, with like Tua and some of their other players maybe not transitioning as well into the cold. So that is an advantage they have. It's not the biggest one, but it matters. Shifting to the advantages for Miami now, there are several of them. This is a very good matchup for teams. Miami has the fact that Tua has been playing, this might get me ostracized, but Tua has been playing better than Jordan Love so far this year. When I say better, I mean Tua to me is a second tier quarterback, which means he's behind Lamar, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Jaden Daniels, up until the past couple of weeks, was also a tier 1 quarterback for me. These tiers are based on 4 advanced analytics being combined in conjunction with each other. They're not just like the eyeball test. So there is something of substance to these stats. Tua is a tier 2 quarterback, and Love is a tier 3 quarterback. So he's right behind Tua. It's not like it's Tua and then a huge gap and then, another gap and then Love. No, it's Tua and then it's a couple quarterbacks and then it's Love. And don't get me wrong, the potential is definitely such that Love could be far ahead of Tua if Love plays to his potential, but he currently isn't. He's been hurt, I realize that, but he's also struggled a bit on his own. So that's prevented him from me being as confident in him as I otherwise would be. The next advantage for Miami is that Teron Armstead will more than likely destroy Lucas Van Ness, both in run blocking and pass protection situations. Van Ness has not been good in either regard this year, which is something that makes me a little bit upset for the Packers that they traded Preston Smith, because I think that Smith is just a better version of Van Ness. At this current point in their careers, Van Ness has sky high potential, but which is kind of a theme, come to think of it, with all these Packers players, is that they draft for potential a lot, and that's something I respect. But yeah, Van Ness, he's struggling in basically every facet of the game, and Armstead is having a year where he's arguably the best left tackle, I would say, in football. I don't mean any disrespect at all to Trent Williams, who is completely elite, but Armstead is really playing like a stud in his own right. The next advantage for Miami is that Jalen Waddle is superior to Keyshawn Nixon or Carrington Valentine. Either of those players will match up against him, depending on the situation. That's a thing, too, for obviously Hill, is that there will be times where Hill is matched up with one of those players, and that'll be advantageous for Waddle. So that's, I guess, a 2-for-1 advantage. Another thing I like for them is that Tua should have time in the pocket. The Packers don't have a very proficient pass rush. They can blitz you and get after the quarterback, and that can speed up the process. That's one thing they've added to their repertoire is blitzing. They weren't doing that with Joe Barry, who is, if you follow that franchise guy, the great that franchise guy, he will ostracize Barry with the best of them. Yeah, Tua, in a general sense, should have time. The Dolphins have, I would say, an average pass protecting line. That's backed by stats. It's not just my opinion. It's PFF's team grade plus ESPN's pass blocking win rate. They're roughly average when you combine those two metrics together. So they aren't a bad line. Obviously, Armstead is going to cancel out basically anybody that crosses his path because he's so good. So that should help as well. Another thing the Dolphins have going their way is that runs up the gut will be there for the taking. They certainly have the advantage in the talent in the interior part of the trenches because I believe it's Carl Brooks. I think that's right. Is one of the interior for the Packers. He's not good against the run. And Kenny Clark is usually a very good defensive tackle, but he hasn't been this year. So Aaron Brewer, he has a chance to use his great athletic abilities and get out in the run game and set some mean blocks deep downfield as well. So that'll be something Mike McDaniel, I think, uses to his advantage, is the fact that the runs should be available up the middle. Between that and Teron Armstead clearing out the left side of the line, they have a lot of runs available to them. Another thing I like for Dolphins is Jonnu Smith can attack either linebacker in the interior for the Packers. I would say especially Quay Walker, but I think it's Isaiah McKinney or maybe Isaiah McKinley. I'm not sure. Either way, Isaiah, he's also able to be attacked, but Quay Walker, I would say, is more so able to be, even though Quay Walker was drafted really high and again has that sky high potential. I think that Jonnu Smith, I think he's just going to be able to really get after the linebackers and have a good game. Another thing the Dolphins have going for them is that Jalen Ramsey can hopefully cancel out Christian Watson, or whoever Ramsey is guarding could hopefully be canceled out. The Packers have a mean repertoire of receivers that makes it hard to say that taking out any one is going to be the best thing. Ideally, they would take out Jaden Reed, but I don't think they're going to have Ramsey in the slot quite like that, even though he can play in there, and it oftentimes does, as he's very physical. But either way, Ramsey taking out a receiver will make them a lot more one-dimensional, so that's really helpful. The final advantage for the Dolphins and for these teams as a whole is that interior runs will be negated by Seiler and Campbell, Calais Campbell. That is super helpful because it again makes the Packers one-dimensional. If you know what they're not going to do, you can tell what they're going to do. So, to put it simply, the Dolphins are going to be able to run up the gut, and the Packers are not. That's really helpful. The Packers, they have a great running scheme. They still might sometimes have success up the middle, but they don't have the greatest interior offensive line for run blocking, and the Dolphins have really good run defenders in the interior. So I think that's really going to favor the Dolphins. Overall, with all of this said, I still lean Green Bay. I think the advantages they have may not be a superior number, but they are a little bit, and just a little bit, greater intensity. I do think it could be a really big issue for Tua to move the ball with his less than ideal arm in the cold. And if that leads to, and I'm not going to say that it will, because this is not like probabilistically a likely outcome, but it is one that exists. If Tua throws an interception because he doesn't get enough arm on it, or maybe he doesn't complete a deep pass that's really crucial because he can't put enough mustard on it, that's really going to switch the game up. And I have no issue with Love whatsoever. He can run into his left, throw into his right. He can throw that in minus 20-degree weather, and he'll be just fine. He has enough arm talent for that. So yeah, I lean the Packers. I think it's going to be a close game for sure. There's a lot of advantages in both directions, and that makes things very interesting. Those are my thoughts on the game. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comments section. And also be sure to like and subscribe for more NFL content.